Krishna, Krishna. I think so.
Can you guys hear online? Can you hear fine? Okay.
Hari.
Hare Krishna. Oh.
Kathleen is here, Kristen, Kara, and Jennifer.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, because there's no voting. That's all right.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna. It's November 22nd, 2020. And welcome to this Bhakti Yoga Enlightenment program here at the Prabhupada House in Melrose, Florida. Feels wonderful to say that. Yes. Yes. And okay, so we're going to, in this part of the program, we're going to study and discuss some transcendental philosophy. And we're focusing on Bhagavad Gita as it is, chapter 12, entitled Devotional Service, text 20. And Mother Anasuya wrote the Sanskrit here. Okay. And we can start responsibly with the Sanskrit words. Yay!
Yay!
To Dharmyamritam Idam Yatoktam Ayupasate Shadadana Matparama Bhaktas Te Tiva Ne Priya Ye tu dharmyamritam idam Yatoktam paryupasate Shadhadana matparama Bhaktas te tiva me priya Ye tu dharmyamritam idam Yatoktam paryupasate Shradhadana matparama Bhaktas te tiva me priya Ye tu dharmyamritam idam Yatoktam paryupasate Shradhadana matparama Bhaktas te tiva me priya. Anyone else would like to recite the verse?
Ye tu dharmamritam idam
Ye tu dharmyamritam idam Yatoktam paryupasate
Shradhadana matparama
Eva Me Priya.
Ye tu Dharma, Vitam Idam.
Ye tu Dharma Vitam Idam.
Yavutam Paripashite.
Yavutam Paripasate.
Shadadana Matparamam.
Shadadana Matparamam. Bhaktaste Eva Me Priya. Yetudamyam vitamidam. Yatoktam paripasate. Shadadana Matparamam. Bhaktaste Eva Me Priya.
Yetu Dharma Amritamidam.
Yetudamyam vitamidam.
Yavutam Paripashate.
Yatoktam paripasate.
Shadadana Matparamam.
Shadadana Matparamam.
Bhaktaste Eva Me Priya.
Bhaktaste Eva Me Priya.
Yetudamam Vitamidam.
Yetudamyam vitamidam.
Yatoktam Paripasate.
Yatoktam paripasate.
Shadadana Matparamam.
Shadadana Matparamam.
Bhaktaste Eva Me Priya.
Bhaktaste Eva Me Priya.
Yetudamam
Yetudamyam vitamidam.
Yatoktam Paripasate.
Yatoktam paripasate. Shadadana Matparamam. Bhaktaste Eva Me Priya.
Yetu Dharma Vitamidam.
Yetudamyam vitamidam.
Yatoktam Paripasate.
Yatoktam paripasate.
Shadadana Matparamam.
Shadadana Matparamam.
Bhaktaste Eva Me Priya.
Bhaktaste Eva Me Priya. Yay.
Yay.
One.
One.
One who?
One who.
Two.
Two.
But.
But.
Dharmya.
Dharma.
Generosity.
Generosity.
Amritam.
Amritam.
Understanding.
Understanding.
Idam.
Idam.
This.
This.
Yata.
Yata.
As.
As.
Uktam.
Uttam.
Said.
Said.
Paripasate.
Paripasate.
Completely engages.
Completely engages.
Shradadana.
Shadana.
With faith.
With faith.
Matparama.
Matparamam.
Taking the Supreme Lord as everything.
Taking the Supreme Lord as everything.
Bhakta.
Bhakta.
Devotees.
Devotees.
Hey.
Te.
Such persons.
Such a person.
Ativa.
Ativa.
Very, very.
Very, very.
May.
May.
Me.
Me.
Priya.
Priya.
Dear.
Dear.
Translation. He who follows this imperishable path of devotional service and who completely engages himself with faith, making me the supreme goal, is very, very dear to me. So the title of our program is Becoming Dear to the Dearest. So there's a series. This is the final verse in a series of 8 verses where Sri Krishna, the speaker of Bhagavad Gita, explains how one can become dear to God. How one can become very dear to God. But in this verse, he's explaining how one can become very, very dear. Specifically. Yes, ativa, very, very. He who follows this imperishable path of devotional service, and when completely engages himself with faith, making me the supreme goal, is very, very dear. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. In this chapter, the religion of eternal engagement, the explanation of the process of transcendental service for approaching the Supreme Lord is given. This process is very dear to the Lord, and he accepts a person who is engaged in such a process. The question, who is better, one who is engaged in the path of impersonal Brahman, or one who is engaged in the personal service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, was raised by Arjuna, and the Lord replied to him so explicitly that there is no doubt that devotional service to the personality of Godhead is the best of all processes of spiritual realization. In other words, in this chapter, it is decided that through good association, one develops attachment for pure devotional service, and thereby accepts a bona fide spiritual master, and from him begins to hear and chant and observe the regulative principles of devotional service with faith, attachment, and devotion, and thus becomes engaged in the transcendental service of the Lord. This path is recommended in this chapter. Therefore, there is no doubt that devotional service is the only absolute path for self-realization, for the attainment of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The impersonal conception of the Supreme Absolute Truth, as described in this chapter, is recommended only up to the time one surrenders himself for self-realization. In other words, as long as one does not have the chance to associate with a pure devotee, the impersonal conception may be beneficial. In the impersonal conception of the Absolute Truth, one works without further result, meditates and cultivates knowledge to understand spirit and matter. This is necessary as long as one is not in the association of a pure devotee. Fortunately, if one develops directly a desire to engage in Krishna consciousness in pure devotional service, he does not need to undergo step-by-step improvements in spiritual realization. Devotional service, as described in the middle 6 chapters of Bhagavad Gita, is more congenial. One need not bother about materials to keep body and soul together, because by the grace of the Lord, everything is carried out automatically. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports to the 12th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavad Gita in the matter of devotional service. Om Jnanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayarupa Kadamayam Darati Swaparantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Parakamalam Shri Shri Vaishnavam Sra Shri Rupam Sarajatam Sakanaraganatam Tam Sajivam Sadhaitam Sadhutam Vijanasaitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Saganamita Shri Vishakantikam Stra Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagapate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namosite Tapta Kanchana Gaurane Radhe Vrindavaneshware Vishavano Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakaupata Yubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Yeta Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Sarasvati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desha Tarine. Text 20, chapter 12 of Bhagavad Gita. Ye tu dharmyam ritamidam yatoktam paryupasate Shradadana mat parama bhaktas te tiva me priya. He who follows this imperishable path of devotional service and who completely engages himself with faith, making me the supreme goal, is very, very dear to me. Hare Krishna. Okay, so I know myself, I was never interested in joining a religion. I was never interested in joining much of anything. Like, yeah, you a member of the Republican Party, or you a member of this group, or like, I was never into it, and that's true for a religion. Okay, I see. What are you doing here? Reading Bhagavad Gita and all these programs. So Prabhupada talks about right at the beginning of the purport in this chapter, the religion, eternal engagement, the explanation of the process, the transcendental service for approaching the Supreme Lord is given. The process is very dear to the Lord. So this, like from an early age, a process of self-realization, the idea of a process of self-realization, that has interested me for many decades. So it's like, yeah, kind of like it tends to be I'll call it a closed-ended conversation. What religion are you? Muslim, Jew, atheist, Buddhist, okay? So whereas like, okay, questions like, okay, what process do you follow for knowing yourself? What's your practice for coming closer to your conception of the divine and supreme nature? What's your process? What's the practice? What's the process you follow? So for me, that's always seemed like a discovery conversation, rather than like, it's important for me to put you in a box, then I feel a little secure. And so just tell me you're Christian, just tell me what you are. And then like, I don't need to, I don't need to like, get to know you like in a fresh way, in a fresh open-ended way where like, we're kind of like at risk in an exciting way. Like, wow, that really busts my paradigms, and I get to get out of the box about who you are and reveal and exchange different dimensions of character and personality. So that's what this is about. Prabhupada's talking about a process, and that's why from the time I started reading Prabhupada's books with heavy skepticism, just a while ago, like 40 years now. And since before I was 20 years old. You can all do the math on that. So like Prabhupada would use terms like the science of self-realization. Well, science, science means you do an experiment, you do an actual experience. So I'd say, so that's interesting conversation for me. What's your process for self-discovery? Okay, you have some idea of God, universe. I'm an atheist, but I believe in nature. Okay, what's your idea? What's your process to commune with nature? Questions like this is always like enlightened my heart, my intellect. Okay, and so and then the Prabhupada's talking about devotional service. The Sanskrit term is bhakti yoga. Sanskrit term is bhakti yoga. And he's saying, okay, so that's like a superior process. Oh, that's judgmental. That's hierarchical. No, let's examine it. Let's look at that. So Krishna is the name of God. Krishna Stu Bhagavan Swami Shri Krishna is the source of all emanation, all incarnations, all expansions of Godhead. So he's saying that through this devotional service, through this bhakti, that one becomes very dear to me. Very dear. So first of all, that makes sense to become dear to God. So the idea here is that the aim for those who choose to accept it, the mission for those who choose to accept it, the aim is to serve God, not become God. Because it's worth mentioning, because in many circles it's assumed, even without talking. Well, of course, the idea is to realize I'm God. But sometimes it's just like kind of assumed, even if it's not talked about. So here it's like, no, it's not the aim is not to become God, but to realize. Well, so that's okay. First of all, that, to use the word some of you have mentioned you'd like that I use, to that just it opens a door to an argument that torpedoes conceptions that the impersonal aspect of the absolute is the most complete. Okay? Torpedo, just like it sinks the ship. Because all right, let's just look at it philosophically. I think as we go on, we'll also look at it emotionally and psychologically and personally. But okay, so that is the only thing that really exists is the undifferentiated oneness, radical and beta bod. Okay, all right. So then how did we come under this illusion that I'm this distinct, separate identity? How did we come under that illusion? 45 years now, I haven't heard a good answer. So how did the undifferentiated oneness, which would be God in the highest sense, how did all of these apparent separate parts spring up? Okay. No good response. I mean, if you come up with one, let me know. Really, honestly. Okay. And then even I did, okay, so you're God, I'm God. But we've forgotten. So how did God fall into forgetfulness? How did the great oneness, the great light, which is it's nothing but knowledge and clarity and shining. How did that oneness of clarity and enlightenment fall into illusion? Immediately you have two. You're not one anymore. You got truth and you got illusion. Because we're an illusion. We just forgot that I'm God. But if I just online this song, take a particular meditation course after 6 months, I'll realize that I'm God. For the bargain rate, 2,000. Okay. So these are serious flaws in such conception. And so it's described. Vasudevi Bhagavati Bhakti Vipruti Janya that by engaging in bhakti, devotional service to God, which is very natural. Because we can we made it unnatural because material life means I want to forget God. I want to do my own sort of God project. Okay. But it's still natural to serve. Bob Dylan had a song, you gotta serve somebody. You're gonna serve the Lord, you're gonna serve the devil, and that sort of thing. So it's our nature to serve. It's our nature to desire. It's our nature to relate. It's our nature to dance and to eat and to be active. And so again, now let's call it the non-personal aspect of the supreme. It is an aspect of the absolute truth. Learn a transcendentalist realize the absolute in 3 phases. The oneness of energy, and then God within the heart, and then Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of God. Prabhupada says, we love our bodies. Why? Because the soul's inside. Soul leaves the body, bury it, burn it, give it to the fish in the ocean. We're not loving it anymore. We love our body because the soul's inside. And Prabhupada, he says, it's natural to love ourselves. Okay, now, but if we think we are the body, then that propensity for loving ourselves, it's distorted, it's perverted, and then we're not fulfilled. As I heard one comedian say, trying to be satisfied by material acquisitions is like trying to satisfy one's hunger by taping sandwiches all over your body. I'm sorry I just put that image in your head. You're not going to be able to get it out for a while. I understand that. But it's my service. This is what I'm sitting up here. It's what I'm supposed to do. So the futility of material life. Okay? So Prabhupada says we love the soul. We love the body because the soul's inside. And we love the soul because we're part and parcel of Krishna, who's the dearest. We're part and parcel of God. We're part and parcel of Krishna, who's the dearest. Krishna, either in the form Krishna, the form of super soul within the heart. Okay. So that super soul, that's the soul of our soul. That's the core of our being. And so that's like that most dear person, the source of our existence, is Ekopya Sorjai Tum Jagaranta Kotim Yat Chaktirasti Jagaranda Chayaranta Antantarasta Praman Chantarasta Govindaman Vipusha Tamaham Bhajani. It says that okay, so Krishna, Govinda, is the source by just a plenary portion, because portion of the portion is the source of innumerable universes, and simultaneously situated in fullness in the core of our hearts, in fact, in the core of every atom, Ishvara. So that most dear person to us. And so Prabhupada says it's natural to love ourselves. It's not that spiritual life means I will wallow in shame because I hate myself now that I'm spiritual or something like that. That's humility. No, it's natural to love ourselves, care for ourselves in all dimensions. And let's get at the root. Why is it natural to love ourselves? Because we're parts and parcels of Krishna. That's our supreme relationship. That relationship's gone well, all relationships are gone well. That relationship, we're disconnected, we're alienated, we're ignoring it, we're denying it, then everything's broken. And so much of life is trying to numb and run from the fact that everything's broken. But that's the one that gives value to the string of zeros. So we do Bhakti Yoga, Vasudeva Bhagavati, Bhakti Yoga, Jani, then because like the idea of the non-personal types of meditation, which it's a real thing, it is a genuine aspect of the absolute. And the idea is to come to knowledge, like not just cognitive, but realized knowledge. The core of all knowledge is, I am spirit, soul, I'm not the body, the distinction between matter and spirit. The root cause of all anxiety, all insecurity is misidentification of the spirit self of the material body. It gets at the core. And then that knowledge arises, awakens naturally, automatically, when one engages in Bhakti Yoga, the yoga of devotional service to the Supreme. Then naturally we awaken to who we are as shining, radiant spirit souls. So cultivating self-realization leads to bhakti. Mm-hmm. And in a sense, more prominently for us, from wherever we're at in self-realization, engaging in bhakti leads to self-realization. Prabhupada describes that in this purple, bhakti is sort of like the elevator process, where like a skyscraper, we can climb the 120 flights of stairs. Here's an elevator, Prabhupada's giving that. So we're talking about that here in Prabhupada House in Melrose. And naturally, with that knowledge comes detachment. We engage in bhakti yoga, and then detachment from what? Detachment from all the stuff we're attached to that gets us in big trouble. We're not going to ask everyone to make a list and do a closed eye process. We're not going to do that. But I know we can all make lists. Okay. Right? I take detachment from all that stuff, all the material stuff, that somehow there's still a part of ourselves telling us that will make us happy, even though it's failed to make me happy the first 850 times. But I'm still going for it. Okay. We can help fill in the blanks for our personal life. So the principle is the higher taste principle. Engage in bhakti, and the soul awakens to its natural bliss. And then those lower tastes that are more either immediately or next morning or a year from now, or the source of this, those lower tastes, they lose their attraction. So bhakti, it's not like a separate compartment of yoga. It's the culmination of the yoga ladder. It includes jnana yoga, which tends to go for the merging into the oneness. It includes Astanga yoga, which tends to go for connection with super soul in the heart. And it includes the benefits of all of them. And so the example is given, just like, well, if I could just example, just like if a child's being destructive. So the parent can say, look, you just sit in the corner, be quiet, do nothing, you just sit there. So the child naturally can sit there and do nothing for maybe 4 seconds, maybe even 5 seconds if it's like a really peaceful child. Okay, and then the child will naturally be driven to do the destructive thing again. Okay, so this is just reality. So a more intelligent parent is just more intelligent parenting instead of just sit, do nothing. A more intelligent parent finds a constructive thing for the child to do. That's more fun than the destructive thing. And then the child is engaged in the constructive, super fun thing, doesn't even think about the destructive thing. The child represents our senses and our mind. The child represents our senses and our mind. And so in an attempt at spirituality, we can attempt some path where the idea is just shut down desire. We've often said the idea of just getting rid of all desires, it's a great idea. It's only the one problem is that it's impossible. Impossible. But what if I try really? No, like, none of us have succeeded to do it. But what about the yogis? No, they failed. And that's not a bad thing. The nature of the spirit soul is to have oceans and oceans and waves of desire, moment after moment. And so trying to shut down and stifle desire, it's a losing proposition. And we're saying because that way we don't have to waste time. It's like the goal of this spiritual or pseudo-spiritual path is to get rid of all desire. Then, right, and even those, we've noticed, coaching and seminar, even those who are kind of attempting on such paths, we tend to go insane. You're laughing at your clients. Can't believe. Okay. Anyhow, so no, really, because it's just like we naturally have a desire. Okay. So bhakti yoga, it's not a process of elimination, it's a process of transformation, transforming the quality of our desire. This is so important. It's unique. It's unique. So it's not like, okay, in material life, I dance at the club or whatever. So spiritual life means no dancing. Okay, that's not very interesting or fun, right? So spiritual life means no eating, no communication, no relating. Right. What's that? Yeah, okay. So so spiritual life means cultivating, learning the art and science of how to relate spiritually, relate in a way that's fulfilling for the soul, okay, rather than taking sandwiches to the body. Just like, just like these clothes have a particular shape, arms and legs. Why? Because my body has a particular shape. Our bodies have a particular shape, so the coat clothes are particular shape. Okay. And just like, let's say my hand has a particular shape, so I wear a very fine glove, so you can still see the shape. And I can still do practically everything. Maybe I couldn't quite pick up a dime. Then let's say I put on a bigger glove. You can still sort of make out the shape, but um, I'm limited. And then on top of that, I put this big winter mitten. On top of that, I put a hockey glove. And then can't really do much. We still sort of make it the shape. So similar. So the body has a shape because the soul has spiritual senses. The soul is consisting of spiritual legs, spiritual arms, eternal spiritual eyes, spiritual tongue, spiritual tasting, spiritual ears. As we practice bhakti yoga, our original spiritual senses get uncovered and awakened. The diamond gets cleansed. And so it's described in the Bhagavatam, the name of Indakshani Mukti Manasthayastabhava Adishuddha Buddha Korea creature from Tata Patanti known as Vista Yoshmaranga. It says that even if one is successful in achieving a sort of non-personal liberation from matter, which is nice, we're really not minimizing that. It's actually an admirable spiritual achievement, but it will be temporary. Just like an object in space, it can float for some time, but gravitational pull will pull it to some planet. So similarly, the gravitational pull is our nature to desire. And so we're going to be attracted to some material planet, some material relationship, if we haven't developed the taste and the experience of Vaikuntha, spiritual relationships that are free from anxiety. To the extent that we do that through the process of bhakti yoga, then again, that's Prabhupada says in one purport in the 15th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, he says, one should be captivated by this information. Yes, this is philosophy, and it's meant to be applied. Yes, awakening my spiritual senses, my spiritual love. Again, because like a conception where the non-personal is conceived as the most complete form of the absolute, there's no love there. It's an escapist philosophy. Because love means too, a voluntary exchange of service and affection between two conscious entities. And attempting to do it on the platform of ignorance of who I am, a spirit soul, ignorance of who is that most dear person, then in the name of love, it becomes exploitation. And if like you exploiting me exploiting well, if the exploitation business is going pretty well, this relationship is good. And in most circumstances, it doesn't go well for too long. And then it results in the festival of misery that we're all familiar with. And so it's kind of, it's an understandable psychology that, yeah, So if you're telling me about spiritual life, and spiritual life means like there's like eternal, forever relationships, forget it. No, I know what relationships are about. So some people become so frustrated. Krishna says one who's given up anger, frustration, fear of spiritual relationship, material attachment. And so then many of those great souls, they achieve devotional love for me. And that's security. That's a bliss that nothing material can ever crush. And so this so out of frustration, one gives up hope of satisfying relationship. Frustration, maybe frustration after a few years, a few decades, a few hundred lifetimes, a few million lifetimes. And so bhakti yoga is like, okay, let's. Prabhupada gives the wonderful geometric analogy. He says, like those who are inclined towards a personal path, they tend to only see 180 degrees, half the circle. It's like the banyan tree analogy. So half the, so we see there's this reflected tree with reflected fruits, and it's all ephemeral. There's no substance. But then there's that other 180 degrees. That's the real banyan tree. So that's real spiritual relationships, real substance with Krishna in the center, with Krishna in the center. And that's the one that gives value to the zeros. And our relationships on this plane get to be really satisfying too. And not really satisfying for the soul, not simply temporarily gratifying for the vehicle, but for the actual. So bhakti yoga, satisfying relationships with God in the center. It's the art and the science how to do that. It doesn't happen by accident. Right? It requires conscious cultivation of this science, the science of self-realization, the science of God consciousness. I said at the start, I've never been interested in religion. And I've never been more uninterested than at this phase in my life. And so this is not religion in the sense of sectarianism. Krishna says in a conclusive instruction in Bhagavad Gita, Savajaman Pripyadya Mame Kam Am Tam Sarvapapebhyo Mokshaya Shami Mashucha. Krishna says at the end of Bhagavad Gita, give up all religion, abandon it, and just serve me with love and devotion. That's the goal of all religion, yoga process, that we get to the essence. He said, well, this is not sectarian, but this looks Indian, whatever. So what I feel, not that like I'm any expert in Jesus or Buddha or Allah. At the same time, with 100% confidence that if anything I've spoken the past 25 minutes, it is the essence of the teachings of all of those avatars, of all of the spiritual teachers. We were talking recently about the Bible. And we can imagine in this morning's class, I see much of what I'm speaking. I'm just following up on Prabhupada's class this morning, which was very wonderful. He talked a lot about Christianity, Jesus, because his sister, Leslie, asked him some very intelligent questions related to, well, how does what you're doing with this Krishna consciousness relate to Christianity and Jesus and like that? So he talked about, he showed pictures of David HaMelech, King David dancing, very similar to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu dancing. He showed pictures of kirtans in Jerusalem 3,000 years ago, very similar to what's happening. Very similar to what the devotees do too. So we can imagine that perhaps Jesus' Maha Mantra was it's the most emphasized mantra in the Old Testament. Shema Yisrael Adonai Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem Kavod B'chuto L'olam B'ed, V'havta et Adonai Elohecha B'kol Levav Nashkal B'chol Decha, which basically is bhakti yoga. Love God with all your heart, all your soul, all your might. It is the Maha Mantra of the Hebrew Old Testament. So there's nothing different here. There's nothing different. Yeah, the forms might be different. And that makes sense that God or his representative will always give the principle. The forms will be different to meet people where they're at. So from wherever you're at, here's form that's going to support you to progress, knowing who you are and coming towards love of God, to convert you to God. This was in about 5 years ago, early 2016. I was in Ricon, Switzerland, which is near Wieland, which is Rosenberg's in Ricon. And apparently, we were there in early 2016. And right up the mountain, like a half-hour walk up the mountain, everywhere. These are pretty low mountains compared to Switzerland. This other place where we were doing seminars for many years, where it's just like the mountains really looked like a portal to another dimension. But these were relatively low mountains. And so right up the mountain, there's a Buddhist ashram. And what I learned was it's a Tibetan Buddhist ashram. And when the Dalai Lama visits Europe, that's where he stays. The Dalai Lama from Tibet comes to Europe, he stays at this place. So we walked up there with myself and the Bonomo family, including Anoop and Noah. Yes, we had snowball fights on the way. It was a whole thing, but I digress. So anyhow, we got to the ashram, and it's like everything like 2 feet of snow, Switzerland in winter. And we got to the ashram, and we go in, and then I walk in, and then now the Buddhist conception is like void, nothingness, void, nothingness. Anyway, so we walk in the ashram, and the first thing that I noticed, touched my heart, was just sweet devotion. Sweet devotion. Even though philosophically they come from what's called a shunyavad type of approach. What is it? They had the morti of the Buddha, the Tibetan monk, and the brahmachari monks, and just sweet offering apple and incense. And it was very clear, it was bhakti. And if we look at the core of Buddha's teachings, it's bhakti. So this is universal. This is non-sectarian, and so here we are at Prabhupada House. And that was the first Bhakti Enlightenment program here, November 22nd, 2020. So Srila Prabhupada, fully in the line of Jesus and Buddha and Muhammad, he's giving us this elevator process for our own self-discovery and to become increasingly dear to God. And the process, pillars of the process are like exactly what we're doing now, giving our time and heart and intellect to hear transcendental sound vibration. It's not a like, okay, look, we all have an experience now. Malani led a kirtan. Earlier, we have an experience of sound vibration, hearing and chanting, right? We could have spent the same hour and a half hearing sound vibration on the places we often go on YouTube. Again, we're not going to ask anyone to say what those places are, things like that. But you get the idea. Different sound vibrations, transformation through sound, different sound vibrations create different experiences, different consciousness. And to the extent that we want self-realization to clear the static between the soul and that most dear, then there are certain sound vibrations that support them, just like exactly what we've been doing the past hour and a half. My PhD dissertation was about the effects of sound vibration on consciousness. And particularly we studied a text from the ancient Vedas. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare. That text from the ancient Upanishads describes that for self-realization and to connect with God in the heart, in this age, this particular sound vibration, this particular mantra is especially recommended. this mantra consisting of 32 syllables, 16 words, really 3 words. Hare, which means the feminine essence of the Supreme. Krishna means all attractive, right? We're all God is most dear. We all have attractive potency. We're all attracted to others with attractive potency. So who's the most dear? Who's the most attractive? That's God. That's God. Right. And so God is like a generic name. It's like some you could call me a person, and it does apply to me. Someone with a more closer relationship, call me Dr. One. Someone with more intimate. David. 2 people on the planet call me Dad. So same person, different level. So Krishna, when you say Krishna, just you have feeling. So Krishna is a very intimate name for that most dear person. God's a generic name. Sometimes we don't use Krishna because some people can get triggered by it. So we'll say God. So we're not attached to a particular name. God has so many names. Rama is a name for God that means the reservoir of all pleasure. We're all seeking pleasure, joy, bliss, happiness. Again, when we tend to seek it in the realm of material desire, we're frustrated. And that frustration, for many, the psychology leads them to, I just want to merge with the oneness. It's like an escapist approach to spiritual life. Bhakti yoga is transforming the quality of our desire and serving God with love and devotion. And then we're connected with Rama, the dearest, the reservoir of all bliss. And that's a bliss, that's a fulfillment, that's a pleasure that no pandemic will interfere with. No economic fluctuations, no political party, no health situation, no relationship tensions can get in the way of that bliss. So I recommend it. Study the words of these transcendental literatures, chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, and make our lives sublime as we connect more and more fully in personal relationship with the most dear. Hare Krishna. Thank you for your attention. Thanks for your presence. I appreciate your listening. I welcome at this time, if anyone would like to share any comments or ask any questions. Gajendra Prabhu.
Thank you. It was stimulating in very many good ways. In support of what you said, I want to add some of my thoughts. And what came to me was this idea of Vogatyaga, sense gratification and renunciation.
Yeah.
So, absent the desire to serve spiritually,
Yeah.
the sensual engagement of the living entity is actually serving one's own senses in a selfish way.
Yeah.
Which leads to that frustration that you talked much about. The response to that is a cycle of sense gratification, renunciation of sense gratification, a cycle not unlike birth and death, which we should try to escape, but that is the material condition. So I also appreciated that you brought in the idea of personalism and impersonalism into it, because I directly relate to, and Prabhupada's Pranam, this idea of liberating us from impersonalism and voidism as directly tied to the way we deal with our desires and where it goes with
that. Thanks for that. Thanks for that, Gajendra. Yeah, he used the Sanskrit terms, Vogatyaga. It's Vogatyaga, as you said, it's indulgence in sense gratification, and then and now I'm frustrated, I'm empty, and then renounce, go to the forest. And then the way out of that is bhakti. It's engaging the senses in bhakti yoga, and the soul's really satisfied. Otherwise, we renounce for some time, but then like, I got these desires. Yeah, let me go do some business again. Let me go like that, and then we're empty. So thanks for complimenting what we talked about with that in the context of Bhoga Tyaga cycle and bhakti. Bhakti being bhakti including gratification of the spiritual senses, including renunciation from matter and transcendent. So it's not material indulgence, and it's not material renunciation means just I'm rejecting the material, but it's not spiritual to reject the material. It's just rejecting the material. And so bhakti includes and transcends. Thank you, Gajendra. I just want to do a sound check. Online, were you able to hear when Gajendra spoke? We'll do a sound check. Yes, good. Thank you. All right. Thank you. So I'll say, if someone speaks from behind the computer, either come in front or speak loud. Okay, another question or comment?
So I'll speak.
Anasia.
Yeah, so I asked Dear Govinda to read this particular verse because I want to become more dear to the dearest. And I feel like Gaetano and Dominique, who are now disciples of Prabhupada, Garuda and Damayanti, I had my first taste of bhakti yoga in their home. They had a home program. And it was really dear. It was really sweet. And I didn't know what I got myself into. And that was 6 years ago. And so I missed the program because it's been a year since we've had a program together again, such as this. And I feel that my heart was opened during the first home program. And so I feel a commitment to Prabhupada in my service to bring this to the Melrose community. And so I feel, this is not a religion. I feel this is very much heart opening and having a personal relationship with God. And if your heart says God is Krishna, all is welcome. And so this was also a personal message for me to remember my service to Prabhupada is to bring others to their relationship with God, whatever that might be, and to find whatever service is in your heart. And so I'm found in my heart, the service is Melrose through Prabhupada's house. And I just want to make that commitment. So I wanted to share with everyone my commitment to my spiritual master Prabhupada. And so I just wanted to give my gratitude to Dear Govinda to be at that first program that I was at, and Malini, who also opened my heart through song. The song of God is also Bhagavad Gita. And so singing the Maha Mantra opened up my heart through song. And so if it touches your heart through song or through prasadam, through spiritual food that we will be serving later, however it touches you, that is my wish for you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Anasia. My heart is moved and touched by your sharing. And Anasuya chose this verse. And I eagerly accepted the opportunity to study this verse today. It's a very dear verse. And what you share, Anasuya, it's just like perfectly Prabhupada's move. And Prabhupada would say it's perfectly Prahlad Maharaj's move. And that's, you got immense, matchless gift. You got immense treasures and benefits. Starting at that first Enlightenment program, just about 6 years ago, at the Kuselas, the Damayanti Prabhu. And from gratitude, you want to pass it on. And you're walking the walk. You're not just talking the talk. And you've established the center, today's program. You're co-managing, co-creating with Lakshmi Priya. And you said Melrose. We're in a place called Melrose, Florida. It might not be a thriving metropolis you've all heard of, but maybe no one here is from Melrose. I'm making the point that you're certainly serving the residents of Melrose, and the transcendental value you're creating goes beyond Melrose. And yes, so so you're using your life to take a strong stand for Srila Prabhupada's mission. Yeah, I appreciate you for that. Hare Krishna. Back to George.
Hare Krishna, David. So we mentioned, I have a question.
You can speak loud enough so they can hear on internet.
Yes, my question is, we spoke about life alienating relationships
Yeah,
and spiritual relationships.
Yeah.
And I know in the past I've also spoken how someone in this lifetime who is a loved individual or a friend in a previous lifetime might have been a hated enemy
Yeah.
and so forth.
Yeah.
And so my question is, how does that relate to devotional service?
okay, so you're talking about, life alienating relationships, material, and then there's bhakti yoga relationships, spiritual relationships. And you kind of refer, like, law of karma, the law of karma. Yeah, maybe in a past life, I was the cause of someone else's pain because of my own material self-absorption. And maybe in this life, we're in a relationship and we're just continuing being the source of each other's material pleasure and pain. Maybe in small ways, maybe in very severe ways. Sometimes close relationships that are very dear result in murder. And we can laugh, but it's just true. I mean, statistically, some result in murder. Some result, well, maybe not in murder, but deep hatred and resentment. So, like, this, we like to make jokes and laugh, but material life, like spiritual life tends to begin when we get how terrible material life is, and acknowledging that. So how's that relate to bhakti? Well, something that comes to me is something we sometimes call the fifth principle of conscious living. Live on purpose. So there's a verse that Prabhupada quotes a lot from the 10th canto, Srimad Bhagavatam Tate. Which essentially says, that verse, it's Lord Brahma speaking to Krishna, and he's essentially saying, especially when things are terrible, especially when, like, this relationship is the opposite of what I envision, it's the opposite of my dreams, or economic situation, or whatever. We're talking about relationship, when things are not going according to script, and it's a cause of material distress, then it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity. What Rama says is the devotional heart responds to that context of, like, here's someone just, like, really the source of my pain, and like that. The devotional heart, the bhakti heart responds to that context with gratitude. This is an opportunity for me to get that, like, I will not be happy, fulfilled, peaceful, secure by taping more sandwiches to my body. It's not a direct quote from Lord Brahma, but you get the idea. And that let me respond to this misery, first of all, by being humble enough to acknowledge, like I'm suffering here. Let me respond to that by deep enthusiasm and dedication to engage in my eternal relationship, to cultivate my eternal relationship, the relationship that really matters. And so then all of the other relationships, whether they're going pretty good or mediocre or this is hell, all those other relationships, they get to be a catalyst to deepen my commitment to cultivate bhakti yoga. And then in that way, we're always successful. If the goal of relationship is self-realization and Krishna consciousness, if that's my goal and intention, we'll always be successful. If I have some other agendas, sometimes success, sometimes not success. Yeah, and then maybe our change of heart, because then if that's my goal, then even in the midst of all this miserable relationship stuff, then I'm actually joyful and peaceful. I'm actually grateful, not in an artificial way. Like we're not advocating a spiritual bypass where like something really irritating happens, or maybe even like mean and nasty, and then we go, well, I know it's God's plan. It's just to get me closer to God. But we're not really realized there. And we're not present with the resentment I'm feeling, the anger, the hurt, the feeling crushed. So we're not advocating spiritual bypass. Because spiritual bypass means I'm not getting the lessons I need to get, and I'm artificially jumping to, I know it's God's plan. Lessons means like, yes, this person, they are really treating me nasty, mean. Yeah, and part of our God conscious process is, yes, and let me look honestly at how I have been and I am unfair to them and neglectful and nasty and mean. And let me look at the pain I've caused others, because if all we tend to see is how others are mistreating me, and I'm the poor victim martyr, I'm like a saint, and we tend to not see how I'm the perpetrator. And for my own desires, gross or subtle, I'm trying to exploit others. And maybe some realization I've been doing this for many lifetimes now, but even if we're not on there, yeah, let me look at how I'm the perpetrator on others. I'm the exploiter. And if we're not seeing that part of it, we're probably not real far along in the path of wisdom. So these are opportunities in that festival of misery that arises.
I appreciate very much your response to have gratitude.
Yeah.
And look at it as an opportunity for awareness.
Yeah.
To really question like why, like what is the end goal as far as getting to Krishna. And I think that I don't know, I've been practicing this for the last 24 hours, and it's opened up a lot of compassion for myself and for other individuals. That was unexpected. And also, like you said, greater endeavor to go internally and try and connect with Krishna in the heart and really get serious.
Thanks for sharing your philosophical and psychological question, and sharing your connection with personal experiences very alive for you. Thank you, George. Ramachandra.
Hearing you speaking about self-love, it's a concept that stepping into spiritual life, I consider to be impersonal, and I see how I found myself not accepting a lot of love around me. So, and because I mean, sometimes I would hear that, like, how can you, and I think you even mentioned that yourself in a lecture, that love means two.
Yeah.
So, I'm me and myself, I mean, how does it work? How do I love myself in a personal way?
Yeah. Well, yeah, the Prabhupada says that it's natural to love ourselves. he says, and that's because we're part and parcel of Krishna. And so my understanding of it, because self-love in maybe different New Age circles, it can become this kind of this airy-fairy sort of thing that lacks substance. So I see that if we're understanding self-love as Prabhupada defines it, it means there are two. There's me and Krishna, and there is two, and so it means that that Krishna did not create a lousy, miserable spirit soul currently called David Wolf or Ramachandra Das. So it can be, it can be a fine line between self-love and conceit and arrogance and, being puffed up. But this self-love goes with humility. This self-love goes with, yes, I love myself, so I don't want to ruin myself anymore by trying to tape sandwiches all over my body. So let me treat myself with dignity and engage in my highest purpose, cultivating the relationship with the most dear. And that requires humility. So that's like self-love. It's self-love, and it's at the core of it is cultivating our most vital relationship with Super Soul in the heart, with our spiritual master, with Krishna, and that's how we show self-love. And and that requires humility to give up the idea that to give up the idea that I'm the controller, I'm the enjoyer. Because I appreciate the question. So we're talking about self-love that requires profound humility. Back in 2002 in Belgium, I gave a class. I think it was Belgium, and it was a while ago, but it got titled. There's no self-esteem if you think you're a bag of stew. Meaning, if our conception of self, if it lacks spirit, so don't want to be morbid, but just saying. So this stuff is made of skin, bones, blood, pus, marrow, stool. That's what this stuff is. So if I'm really identifying with that, we could do the 12 years of therapy, but still, if that's my conception of self, then self-love, self-esteem will just be this concoction. So self-love, the soul awakening to the glorious diamond, radiant, effulgent, conscious being that I am, and that awakening comes by cultivating loving devotional service. Okay.
So I guess you cannot really truly love yourself without loving God first.
Yeah, and I would say that the operative term there was truly. Yeah, I like that, because that supports what I said. Otherwise, yeah, there can be apparent self-love, but it's either but it's contrived. It's contrived. It's artificial. Maybe it's an apparent show. But yeah, again, it's not about a group, right? There can be someone who says, I'm an atheist, but they have such connection with the Supreme, and they actually have a real respect for themselves. But because they're sick of religion, I think to call themselves spiritual means that people think I'm a Jew or a Christian or Hare Krishna. So it's not about what group, but yeah, so I agree with your statement in the word truly, because otherwise it can become a lot of psychobabble in the name of self-love and a lot of further masks in the name of take down the mask and just love yourself. And if there's no connection with the divine in some form, ideally the personal form, then yeah, then self-love is a masquerade. I appreciate your question.
It's like an illusion. It seems like, because in order to give love, we need to know
Yeah.
and to see.
Yeah.
And an analogy that Prabhupada gives, like, I cannot see myself until and unless I can see the sun.
Yeah.
Because if the sun is not there,
Yeah.
then I'm in the darkness and I don't see myself.
Yeah.
And I don't know myself. And then when the sun comes out, nobody else can see the sun. I can see everything else and I can see myself at the same time.
Yeah.
And then in that seeing of the self, that's what brings the real love for the absolute, the true love.
That's a perfect example from Prabhupada. That the sun represents God there. And so, yeah, we don't see anything without the sun, including myself, even in terms of me and the body, the analogy. All right, because like the sun, the light bulb comes from the sun. Like all light comes from the sun. But also gives the analogy of if we decorate, if one decorates their self, their face, it's an analogy, then the image in the mirror is also decorated. So the actual self, the analogy, that represents God, Krishna, and we are the reflections. We are parts and parcels. We're like reflections. So when we glorify Krishna, then we're naturally glorified. And if we're trying to let's get Krishna out of there, don't put me in the center, then everything deteriorates from there. So we put Krishna in the center. We have a natural, again, we're person. We naturally want to celebrate others. We want to glorify. So it can become a political figure, a sports hero, entertainment, intellectual. And when we direct that propensity to God and God's devotees, then our natural self-love manifests in the most humble way. Humble because it's not about me being in the center, it's about me being the servant. Thanks for that.
Yeah, and in coaching we can see that when people have interpersonal difficulties, we all start from if I don't love myself, then I cannot love others.
Yeah.
And also the counterpart of that is that when I do love myself, connecting with Krishna, then of course I'm going to love everybody else because they're all everybody is part of Krishna.
Yeah.
And to not love or like someone is kind of refusing to love and love Krishna.
Yeah. And that relates to the one in front of the zero, and bhakti yoga being inclusive. Otherwise, in the name of religion, yoga, or whatever, it becomes a form of sectarianism. Right? Yeah. If we're loving, if we're truly loving God and engaged in that relationship, then naturally we're going to love all of God's children, whether in bodies called white, black, Democrat, Republican, tall, short, Chinese, French, American, cow, pig, chicken. Get
Yeah, I was related to thought again. What you just said. I'm definitely not suggesting to have a transactional relationship with God. Definitely not. But nevertheless, I would make the point that if one is interested in experiencing love, having love, that because of what you just said, the reciprocation relationship, actually by loving God, who is a person, who is more than capable of reciprocating with you, truly capable of reciprocating with you, the best path to self-love is love of God.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yes, thanks for that. Actually, a transactional relationship with God, it's recommended in the early stages. And then at some point, when the devotional soul isn't even thinking about self-love or its own spiritual happiness, but if the idea is, look, I just want to be happy and I'm frustrated, and I admit that, and it's embarrassing. Okay, now I'm hearing about bhakti yoga, So if I do this, if I chant Hare Krishna, serve Krishna, serve Prabhupada's mission, then I'll be happy and I'll feel some self-love rather than just hating myself and all of that. Okay, I'm going to go for it. So that's it's a wonderful direction to direct our propensity for happiness and self-love. Then as the soul gets more and more purified, then the soul's not even thinking about my own feelings about myself. Thanks for sharing. Actually, so in the next part of our program, let's continue in a different form of experience of becoming dear to the most dear, and we'll have an experience for those who would like to participate. We'll have an experience of chanting Hare Krishna Maha Mantra in the form of japa. At the beginning, Malini led us in mantra chanting in the form called kirtan or bhajan. Next is in a form called japa. And for those who would like to participate in hearing and chanting, we'll explain how it goes. After chanting japa for a few minutes, we'll have another kirtan and then prasadam, which is dovetailing the eating process in spiritual life. So Bhakti Yoga definitely includes the eating process. Yes, I can vouch for that.
What is your plate of prasadam to japa ratio at this point?
Oh, at this point, right, it was 1,000 to 1 the first 3 weeks, and I'm still doing the math on that. But I think by next program I'll have numbers.
Would you like these?
Okay, and so yeah, let's be with our experience for now, and so for those who might not be familiar with the japa process, it's generally recommended we use the right hand, thumb and middle finger, right hand, thumb and middle finger, and we start with the bead next to the large bead. Large bead means the one with the tassel. Thumb and middle finger, right hand, and we start with the bead next to the large bead. And on that bead, we chant one Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Then we move to the second bead away from the large bead. And again, chant one mantra. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Then we move to the third bead, away from the large bead. Chant one Maha Mantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. In this way, we chant one Maha Mantra per bead, not including the large bead. There's 108 beads on the strand. So for the next part of our program, we will chant in unison one round, which means 108 mantras, one round. And the basic idea of any meditation process is to control the mind. And the principle is that the more senses engaged in an activity, even like it's the principle behind multimedia presentation, the more senses engaged, the easier it is for the mind to focus. So in this mantra meditation, it naturally engages the sense of speech, the sense of hearing. When we use japa beads, it involves a sense of touch. Kirtan dancing, the whole body is engaged. And so the idea of this mantra meditation, chant the mantra, do our best to focus our mind and hearing on the sound of each word of the mantra, and notice our experience. If we notice our mind wandering, which mine always does, just notice that and try to bring our power of hearing back to the vibration of the mantra and be with our experience. So let's chant with the first bead next to the large bead, and we'll chant one round in unison for those who would like to join. Let's begin. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Would anyone like to briefly share your experience? What's happening for you now, your experience of chanting? If anyone would like to briefly share. Malini.
I should say online too.
Online also, yes, you're definitely invited.
I can share.
Okay,
I
Malini.
am experiencing energy. I'm experiencing gratitude for the devotees and also
Energy and gratitude for the devotees of the Lord. Thank you, Malini. Rukmini.
I just felt like Prabhupada's presence here, like something together. And all of us together chanting felt like, there's like this unity was so strong. Like the center, everything was like centered. There was nothing else but kind of chanting together and carrying all of us. It's like,
Possibly they didn't hear any chant, so I'll repeat. Rukmini shared, you experienced a special presence, like a powerful, practically magical focus and unity from everyone chanting together.
I felt Prabhupada's presence before.
But you felt Prabhupada's presence, yes.
So Prabhupada and also Kayapani came from
Kayapani. Thanks for sharing. Thank you, Rukmini. Other sharing. Sarah.
I'm experiencing like the material world is calling and also the spiritual world is calling.
Experienced, in a sense, a sort of competing callings. Material world and the spiritual world's calling. And it was like the contrast was magnified and intensified in that chanting. Thanks for sharing, Sarah. I relate to that. Anasuya.
I'm experiencing sweet connection and coming home.
Sweet connection and coming home. Thank you. Danielle.
For the first time, I experienced my own voice contributing, but in a way that I could distinctly understand, not being lost with everyone else.
Thanks for sharing, Danielle. You experienced, you've had this chanting experience of many times, and for the first time, you experienced your own distinctive voice contributing in a distinctive way without your voice emerging.
Yes.
Thank you, Danielle. Narayan.
I'm experiencing the power of harmonious devotion and grounding.
The power of harmonious devotion and grounding. Thanks for sharing, Narayan.
The analogy that came also was that when there's a lake and one pebble is in the middle, so this, very harmonious.
Everything's resonant.
Yeah, conversion is like very harmonious.
Yes.
And in that, I feel like the oneness in that sense, like we're all on the same page, on the same wavelength.
Rukmini sharing, she shared the imagery of like if a stone is dropped into a lake, then there's the ripples, and then if there's more and more stones that go to the same place, then it just becomes this resonant wave. So like synergy, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, and you experience that type of very dynamic, alive oneness. Gajendra.
My experience is a longing or a desire to improve. And in saying that, I referenced something some Lubavitch guys once left me from Genesis, but it was the idea that said, if you improve, you will be forgiven. So I think of forgiven. So the 10 offenses against them, I need to improve.
Thanks for that. Gajendra shared that in case anyone on the internet didn't hear, you experienced a desire to improve in a very healthy, life-giving, energy-promoting way. And Gajendra shared some wisdom he got from the Lubavitchers from Genesis, that if we improve, we're forgiven. That's great stuff. That reminds me of the Sarvadaman Yavars. That like whatever our past has been, we've had failures, we've had mistakes, really foolish stuff, really maybe evil stuff, whatever. Just this moment improve, and we improve and we transcend our past by Krishna's grace. Thanks for sharing. And so this process. This mantra yoga process, Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, it's a cornerstone process of Bhakti Yoga. Bhakti Yoga is a life-encompassing process. To do Bhakti Yoga, really all it requires is 24 hours per day of full commitment, 7 days per week, 365 and a quarter days per year. That's really all that's being asked. Okay, but also the good news is Neha Vikramanasho stay Pratyavayana Vijitane. That also Krishna emphasizes. Yes, Krishna like, give 100%, and if you're ready to give 0.01%, great, that's great too. So they're both true. And so this chanting is a cornerstone. And this chanting Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, it's been a foundation of my spiritual practice going back more than 37 years. And we just chanted one round. I made a vow to Srila Prabhupada that I'll chant at least 16 rounds per day. And a vow and commitment, those words could sound onerous. I can say that I feel very fortunate and blessed that I love my life, all parts of it. And the part of each day I look forward to the most is fulfilling my commitment to chant at least 16 rounds per day of this mantra. For me, it energizes me, supports me to respond to life in its complexity and in its disturbance, life including my own mind, to respond to life with spiritual enthusiasm. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu describes Nam Akri Bahuda Nita Sarva Shaktis. Etajashi Tavakripa Bhagavan Mapi Durdeva Mitrasana Chaitanya Tatravatanyamta Smarani Nakala which means, well, one of the things it means is that this particular mantra, there's no hard and fast rules and regulations. We just chanted in a group, about 20 of us, and we chanted on beads. We could be walking in the park and singing Hare Krishna. We could be driving in the car. We could be alone, sitting, standing, walking. There's no rules and regulations. And so simply to wherever we're at, in whatever situation, we can do the experiment of chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, and notice our experience. And this is a process that is tried, tested, and true, very ancient, even eternal process for purifying our heart and developing sincere desire to serve God with love and devotion, and cleansing the heart from all the junk and garbage. It's not necessarily a comfortable and painless process, because when we chant sincerely, it's cleansing. When we cleanse, sometimes dirt comes up. I mean, that's been part of my process too. It's definitely a very rewarding, fulfilling process. So in the next part of the program, we'll experience kirtan again, and then prasad, transcendental vegetarian food. Thank you all. Bhagavad Gita ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna Maha Mantra ki jai. Hare Krishna. Namo Om Vishnu. Madhura Prabhu, would you like to lead kirtan?
Dancing kitten.
Dancing.
Politely.
Is it harmonium up today?
Of course.
What do you choose?
Whatever you choose.
Yeah. What would you like to be? Would you like to be in the center? Or? No, yeah. Okay. Would you like a table?
No.
You're fine with that? Okay.
You need only one side.
Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Jaya Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Harinam Sankirtan. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Prabhupada ki jai. Shri Prabhupada ki jai. Dinner's gonna be up front on the front porch, so fresh air. Take your mask off. Oh, good. Take your mask off. What? Oh, yes, so
Thank you for joining us.
thank you for coming.
Hi, Krishna. I wish you were here.
Yeah, I wish you were here too. Kathleen and Kristen. Hi, Krishna.
Hi, Krishna.
I hope you dance too in your apartment. That you had a dance party.
Hi, Krishna.